What if cleaning your home could actually change the way you live? That probably sounds a little dramatic at first. But people who seriously declutter often describe something surprisingly similar. They say the room changed, but they changed even more. They sleep more deeply and feel calmer when they come home. They spend money more carefully and make decisions with less hesitation. Some even say they become more patient with the people around them. What begins as a conversation about clutter slowly becomes a conversation about life. I can't pretend I have always been naturally organized. A few years ago, I was actually terrible at keeping things in order. If I took something out, there was a good chance I would leave it there. My room was not a disaster, but it was definitely not peaceful either. Eventually, I learned that keeping a home organized does not require perfect discipline. What matters more is following the right process in the right order. First, you reduce what you own. Then you organize what remains. Finally, you create a system that prevents the clutter from returning. If you follow that order, your home becomes easier to maintain. And something else may begin to change along with it. Your mind starts feeling a little less crowded too. In this video, we will look at 4 psychological benefits of decluttering. Then I'll show you 3 practical ways to make the change actually last. By the end, you may understand why being organized is less about personality than you think. Before we get into the practical steps, there is something important to understand. You need a strong reason for decluttering before you begin. Otherwise, there is a good chance everything will eventually return to normal. People who struggle with clutter often share one major difficulty. They have trouble letting things go. Behavioral economists have studied this tendency for decades. One famous concept is known as the endowment effect. Researchers including Daniel Kahneman demonstrated this with a simple experiment. Some college students were given ordinary coffee mugs. Other students were not given anything. The students who owned the mugs were asked how much they would sell them for. The other students were asked how much they would pay to buy one. Everyone was looking at essentially the same mug. But the people who already owned it valued it much more highly. They had only owned the mug for a very short time. Yet simply becoming the owner changed how valuable it seemed. Now think about the shirt in your closet that has been there for 10 years. Think about the old electronics sitting inside a drawer. Think about the books you keep promising yourself you will someday read. If a few minutes of ownership can create attachment, imagine what 10 years can do. This is why difficulty decluttering does not automatically mean you lack willpower. Your brain may simply be assigning extra value to things because they belong to you. But this psychological tendency can also be used in your favor. If letting something go feels like a loss, look at the cost of keeping it. Once you see what clutter is costing you, your motivation begins to change. I should get rid of this can slowly become, I actually want this gone. That brings us to the first major benefit. Benefit #1. A cleaner space can help you feel calmer. This goes beyond the obvious fact that clean rooms look nicer. The environment around you can quietly influence the way you behave. Researchers have studied what happens when people are surrounded by visible disorder. In one experiment in the Netherlands, flyers were attached to parked bicycles. There was no trash can nearby. People had to either carry the flyer with them or drop it on the ground. The researchers compared 2 different versions of the environment. In one version, the surrounding area appeared clean and orderly. In the other version, there were visible signs of disorder, such as graffiti. When the environment looked disorderly, more people chose to litter. They did not consciously decide that graffiti gave them permission. The environment simply changed what behavior felt normal. Something similar can happen inside your own home. Leave one package on the floor, and another one soon feels less out of place. Leave one plate in the sink, and more dishes quickly begin to follow. Disorder has a way of quietly multiplying. But the opposite is also true. Order can spread too. When a kitchen counter is completely clear, you hesitate before cluttering it. When a room feels peaceful, you naturally want to protect that feeling. Your environment is constantly teaching your brain what belongs there. That means the irritation you feel at home may not always come from your personality. Sometimes you are simply surrounded by too many visual reminders of unfinished tasks. A bag on the floor quietly says that something still needs attention. A stack of unopened mail tells you there is another decision waiting. A crowded desk reminds you that there is more work you have not finished. You may not consciously think about these things every time you see them, but your brain still has to process them. That is one reason a cleaner space can feel emotionally lighter. You are not only removing objects, you are reducing the number of signals competing for your attention. There is another side to this idea. Changing the environment can sometimes change the people inside it. A well-known example comes from Japanese businessman Saburo Kageyama. When his company was young, the workplace reportedly had serious discipline problems. Employees were rough with one another and ignored repeated attempts to correct them. Instead of constantly lecturing people, Kageyama began cleaning the workplace himself. He cleaned early in the morning and sometimes late at night. At first, some employees reportedly mocked him, but he continued without forcing anyone else to participate. Over time, employees gradually began helping. Eventually, cleaning became part of the culture of the company. The larger lesson is simple. Changing people directly is often difficult. Changing the environment can make different behavior easier to adopt. The same principle can work inside your home. Benefit #2. Decluttering can help you keep more money. Imagine you need a pair of scissors. You know you own one, but you cannot find it anywhere. You search several drawers and check the kitchen. You look through your desk and maybe even the closet. Eventually, you give up and buy another pair. 6 months later, the original scissors suddenly appear. Most people have experienced some version of this. It happens with charging cables, batteries, nail clippers, tools, and toiletries. When you own too much, things become difficult to see. And when you cannot see what you own, you buy duplicates. Some surveys suggest people spend more than an hour each month looking for misplaced belongings. That may not sound significant when you think about a single month, but over many years, those lost minutes become hours and days. Searching for things is a hidden cost of clutter. There is another way clutter quietly drains money. People often buy storage when they run out of space. They purchase another bin, shelf, basket, or organizer. But sometimes storage is not the real problem. Sometimes there is simply too much stuff. Buying another container does not reduce the amount you own. It only gives the clutter a new place to hide. And when more empty storage appears, people often fill it again. Decluttering interrupts that cycle. When you can clearly see what you own, duplicate purchases become less common. You also stop spending money on endless storage solutions. But an even bigger shift can happen after you own less. The things that remain are usually the things you genuinely like. That changes the way you shop. When you enter a store, pretty good no longer feels good enough. You become more selective about what deserves to enter your home. Instead of thinking, "It's cheap, so why not?" you ask a better question. Do I actually want this enough to make space for it? Throwing something away can feel like throwing money away. But the money you paid for that object is already gone. Keeping an unused object does not bring that money back. Sometimes letting go is what prevents you from wasting even more money later. Benefit #3. Decluttering reduces unfinished decisions. When you look at a messy room, you probably see too many objects. But the deeper problem may be something else. You may be surrounded by too many decisions that have never been completed. The shopping bag by the door represents one decision. The jacket hanging on the chair represents another. The unopened mail on the table creates another question. Every object quietly asks what you plan to do with it. Should you keep it? Should you move it? Should you throw it away? Should you finally deal with it today? You may not consciously ask these questions every time you walk through the room, but unresolved tasks have a way of continuing to occupy attention. That can explain why you sometimes feel restless even while sitting at home. Your body may be resting, while your mind remains surrounded by unfinished business. Getting rid of one unnecessary object is also a small act of decision-making. You are telling your brain that one question has finally been answered. And once a decision is complete, it no longer needs the same attention. This is why some people notice something interesting while decluttering. Their mind starts feeling lighter before the room looks dramatically different. And this habit of making decisions can spread beyond the home. You finally answer the message you have been postponing. You complete the small task you have avoided for several days. You cancel the subscription you have not used in months. We often think decisiveness is something people are simply born with. But part of it comes from repeated practice. Your home gives you hundreds of opportunities to practice. Keep it, donate it, repair it, move it, or throw it away. Every clear decision makes the next decision slightly easier. Benefit #4. A cleaner space can make motivation easier. Think about the last time you walked into a nice hotel room. The desk was probably empty. The bed was neatly made. The towels were folded, and the room felt unusually calm. For some reason, people often feel more optimistic in environments like that. You start imagining waking up earlier tomorrow. You think about going for a walk or finally reading that book. You may even feel like getting some work done. Part of that comes from being somewhere new. But another reason is that the environment contains very little friction. There is nothing you need to move before using the desk. There is no pile of laundry covering the chair. There are fewer unfinished tasks sitting directly in front of you. Many people believe they cannot clean because they lack motivation. But sometimes the relationship works in the opposite direction. You may lack motivation because your environment makes everything harder to start. Psychology often shows that behavior can come before motivation. You do not always feel motivated and then begin. Sometimes you begin, and motivation appears afterward. Clutter makes that first action more difficult. Before you work, you need to clear the desk. Before you sit down, you need to move the laundry. Before you start cooking, you need to clean the counter. Each task may take only a few seconds. But small amounts of friction repeated every day slowly drain your willingness to begin. You may not be lazy at all. Your environment may simply be making every action slightly harder than necessary. Now we can move into the practical part. The order is important. First, reduce what you own. Second, organize what remains. Third, prevent the clutter from returning. And the first step does most of the heavy lifting. Step #1. Reduce before you organize. Do not begin by buying more storage containers. Do not begin by rearranging everything you already own. And do not begin by trying to create a perfect Instagram-worthy closet. Start by reducing the total amount of stuff. This is usually the most difficult part. The moment you pick something up, your brain says you might need it someday. So instead of asking whether you should throw something away, change the question. Ask yourself this instead. If this disappeared today, would I go out tomorrow and buy another one? Think about the random charging cable buried in your drawer. If it disappeared tonight, would you immediately replace it? Think about the extra guest slippers nobody ever uses. Would you spend money buying the same pair again tomorrow? Think about the textbook you bought years ago and never opened. Would losing it make you order another copy right away? In many cases, the answer becomes surprisingly clear. The object is the same, but the psychological frame has changed. Asking whether to discard something makes your brain focus on loss. Asking whether to buy it again forces you to evaluate its real value. Humans experience loss more strongly than simply choosing not to acquire something. Changing the question can remove much of the emotional weight. This technique works especially well with paper clutter. Old instruction manuals, expired warranties, junk mail, and outdated documents accumulate quickly. One sheet of paper seems insignificant. But several years of paper can take up an enormous amount of space. There is one category you should not begin with. Leave sentimental possessions until the end. Photos, letters, childhood objects, and meaningful gifts require much more emotional energy. If you begin with the hardest decisions, you may burn out before you gain momentum. Instead, choose one small and boring area. Start with one drawer. You could also choose a bathroom cabinet or a small section of your closet. Pick an area you can completely finish within about 30 minutes. This matters because your brain needs to see what finished looks like. One completely organized drawer can become a new reference point. Every time you open it, you remember how good that sense of order feels. Then you naturally want the next area to feel the same way. Trying to declutter the entire house at once often produces the opposite result. You pull everything out and make the room look even worse. After several hours, you become exhausted before the job is finished. Then your brain learns that decluttering is painful and overwhelming. Start small enough to create a visible win. There is another idea that helps when you hesitate to let something go. Keeping an object also has a price. Every possession occupies space inside a home you are paying for. If a large part of your apartment stores things you never use, That space has a cost. You are paying rent or a mortgage for that storage area every month. You are also paying with attention and maintenance. That does not mean everything you rarely use should be thrown away. It simply means keeping something is not always the free option. Step #2. Make things easy to put back. After reducing what you own, you can organize what remains. This is where many people misunderstand the purpose of organization. Organization is not primarily about making your home look beautiful. A good system makes things easy to return to their proper place. Every frequently used object should have a clear home. But do not only choose the place that looks best. Choose the place that is easiest to use when you are tired. Think about yourself after a long day at work. You are hungry, distracted, and mentally exhausted. That version of you will not follow a complicated storage routine. Imagine that putting something away requires several separate steps. You open a cabinet, pull out a box, remove the lid, and put the object inside. Then you replace the lid, return the box, and close the cabinet. That system may look beautiful, but tired people usually avoid systems that require too much effort. Try to make frequently used items returnable in one simple motion. A basket without a lid may work better than an elaborate organizer. A hook beside the door may work better than a hidden closet. A tray on the counter may be better than another complicated storage box. Remember that hiding something is not the same as organizing it. Items you use every day should usually remain easy to reach. There is another important principle. Leave some empty space. Think about how paintings are displayed inside an art museum. The walls are not completely filled from one end to the other. There is generous empty space between important pieces. That space makes each object feel more valuable. The same thing happens inside your home. When a shelf has breathing room, you notice the objects that remain. When a closet is not completely full, your favorite clothes become easier to see. Empty space is especially valuable in places visitors never see. Your drawers, cabinets, and closets should not be filled to maximum capacity. If everything is packed tightly on the day you finish organizing, clutter will return quickly. A useful rule is to keep storage at roughly 80% capacity. Leave the other 20% available for future items. New things will eventually enter your life. Mail arrives, groceries come home, gifts appear, and you buy new clothes. If there is no available space, those new things end up on counters and floors. A home becomes cluttered quickly when new possessions have nowhere to go. The problem is not always that you are messy. Sometimes the path back to the proper place is simply too difficult. 1. Self. Step #3. Prevent the clutter from returning. Imagine your entire home is one large bookshelf. If the bookshelf is already full, adding a new book requires removing another. The logic is obvious when we think about a bookshelf. But strangely, we often forget this rule when it comes to the rest of our home. So create one simple rule. When one item comes in, one item goes out. If you buy a new shirt, choose an older shirt to donate. If you buy a new book, let go of one you no longer value. If you buy new shoes, consider removing a pair you rarely wear. As long as you follow this rule, your possessions cannot grow without limits. But the bigger benefit is psychological. The rule changes the way you shop. Every time you consider buying something, another question appears. What am I willing to remove in order to make room for this? That jacket in the store may look great, but is it better than something already hanging in your closet? Would you truly give up something you already own to make room for it? If not, you may not want the new item as much as you thought. Over time, only things you genuinely value earn a place in your home. Your home stays less cluttered, and your buying habits become more intentional. There is one more surprisingly simple environmental cue that may help. Try making your home smell clean and pleasant. Research by psychologist Rob Holland and colleagues explored the effects of cleaning-related scents. In their experiments, subtle scents associated with cleanliness influenced cleaning-related behavior. People were often unaware that the smell had influenced them. A clean scent will not magically turn someone into an organized person. But the broader lesson is useful. Your environment can quietly encourage certain behaviors. A clear counter makes you more reluctant to clutter it. A laundry basket in the right place makes it easier to use. A room that feels clean can make you want to preserve that feeling. Instead of constantly asking how to become more disciplined, ask something else. How can I make the right behavior easier to perform? That question is much more useful than blaming yourself every time a system fails. Throughout this video, we have been talking about the psychology of decluttering. But decluttering is not really about throwing away as much as possible. At its core, decluttering is about making decisions. You decide what deserves to remain. You decide where each object belongs. You decide what should no longer enter your space. And those small decisions slowly become part of the way you live. Your home is one of the environments your brain sees every single day. It is one of the first things you experience after waking up. It is also where you return after the outside world has exhausted you. What you place around yourself therefore matters. That does not mean a perfectly clean home makes you a better person. And it does not mean minimalism is automatically the best way to live. The point is that your environment can create friction or remove it. It can constantly remind you of unfinished tasks, or it can give your attention a little more room to recover. If you have struggled to throw things away, do not assume something is wrong with you. Attachment to possessions is extremely human. Some objects represent money you worked hard to earn. Others remind you of people you once loved. Some represent plans you had for the future. And some represent the person you once believed you would become. That is why letting go can feel much harder than it appears from the outside. Creating space does not mean rejecting your past. Sometimes it simply means choosing what deserves to follow you into your future. So do not try to transform your entire home today. Choose one object you already know you no longer need. Make one clear decision about that object. Then notice the empty space that remains after it is gone. Sometimes changing your life does not begin by adding something new. Sometimes it begins by making room for something new to arrive. Before you leave, think about one object you have struggled to let go of. What is it, and why do you think you are still holding on to it? You can also share which idea from this video feels realistic enough to try today. Your comment may help someone who is struggling with the exact same problem. On this channel, we explore psychology, human behavior, and the hidden patterns shaping modern life. We also look for practical ways to make everyday life feel a little easier. If this video gave you something useful to think about, consider subscribing and leaving a like. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.